Remember last time I fell down the rabbit hole of power networks? Well,
Oh shit. Here we go again.
just as I was formulating an answer to a comment saying, I do not like to show or teach methods in Foxhole that I consider exploits, or at least non-intended mechanics, I came across another comment. It stated that recipes only slow down when the total supplied power to a network is exceeded by the network draw, not when the draw exceeds the shown combined power. In my facility power guide, I stated that power networks have a maximum carrying capacity of 30 megawatts of power. Providing more power to a network will waste all potential power beyond that maximum. So, if you run 3 petrol power plants in a single network, they would, theoretically, produce 36 megawatts of power together. But the entire network will only accept 30 megawatts. If this commenter was right, the statement I made about power network limits was wrong. After I made sure I understood the claim in the comment, I was happy to find out that the dev branch was still open and I could dive into another rabbit hole concerning power. No Crowd9ers were consulted or harmed in the making of this video. This video is provided for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute providing facility advice. The information provided should not be used for planning or constructing facility power networks, and those seeking facility improvement should consult with a licensed facilitarian. Always check with your own facility manager regarding the construction and management of the power network and operation of the facilities therein. The first thing to test was obviously if recipes indeed do not slow down when the network draw is bigger than the stated network power, but lower or equal to the supplied power. So, I readied the CV and started hammering. First, a bunch of foundations, followed by 3 diesel power plants. Then, to reach 36 megawatts combined power, I upgraded the power plants to petrol power plants. Another round of foundation hammering followed, so I could place facilities on top of them to draw the power. For facilities, I decided to build ammunition factories to have access to 4 megawatt recipes instead of having to build more material factories that at best provide 3 megawatts of power draw. Apparently not being great at math, I built only 7 ammunition factories at first, but careful recalculation on my side revealed to me that that would only result in a maximum draw of 7 times 4 is 28 megawatts. So I expanded the foundations to accommodate more facilities. One materials factory to add a 2 megawatt recipe to the network power draw so it would be equal to the maximum shown power of 30 megawatts. And additionally, another ammunition factory to add an extra 4 megawatts of draw to overdraw the shown power to 34 megawatts, but stay below the provided power of 36 megawatts. Having connected everything together with power poles and lines, it was time to preload all the facilities with resources so they could run for quite a bit of time. This being dev branch, I had to keep in mind that all recipes would run at a vastly accelerated pace and therefore supply them with more materials than I otherwise would. With everything prepared, it was time to fire up the 3 petrol power plants. This, as expected, made the power panel state that there was 30 megawatts of power available in the network. I then proceeded to turn on ammunition factories to progressively draw more and more power from the network. The materials factory added a final 2 megawatts of draw that made the power draw and stated power supply both 30 megawatts. One ammunition facility remained. Turning this on would overdraw the stated available power by 4 megawatts, and should make the recipe, or rather all recipes, slow down. The Hullbreaker mine recipe I used for this normally takes 25 seconds to complete. I knew that when I overdrew the network, I would only see the longer production time after the recipe had started. I turned on the recipe and 25 seconds. I realized right then and there that a 25-second recipe, even at the best of times, would not have that big of an increase in completion time with a 13% overdraw. In fact, that would work out to about 28 or 29 seconds completion time for the recipe. And this being dev branch, those 25 seconds actually take about 3 seconds, and I might not even be able to spot the difference in completion time. Running through the available recipes, I decided to go with the thermal shielding recipe. This would take 25 minutes to produce under normal circumstances, and should show a significant increase to its completion time even in the accelerated dev branch environment. So, after preparing the last ammunition factory for thermal shielding production, I went around and restarted all facilities up till a total of 30 megawatts of power consumption. Opened the final ammunition factory and started the thermal shielding production recipe. And lo and behold, the power status panel claimed low power, but the recipe itself did not slow down and still took 25 minutes to complete. To make sure that it's not just the residual 6 megawatts of the 36 megawatts total power provided that can be used, I fell into a rabbit hole. Again, I constructed another petrol power plant to increase the total amount of power supplied to the system to 38 megawatts. Then proceeded to build extra facilities to consume that extra power. With a total of, now 13, facilities ready for production, I now supplied the network with the 4 petrol power plants. Started to turn on the facilities one by one and slowly increased the power draw to 34 megawatts. Then, for dramatic purposes only, I carefully turned on the facility that would bring the total draw to 38 megawatts. 2 megawatts above the 36 megawatts provided by 3 petrol plants, but definitely below the total, theoretical, supplied power of 48 megawatts delivered by 4 petrol plants. Its thermal shielding recipe still took 25 minutes to complete, meaning the 4th power plant actually supplied power to the network as well. Emboldened by this, I kept adding facilities to a total draw of 46 megawatts. None of this impacted the production speed of the recipes. Then, once again at the final materials factory, I added an order for construction materials, drawing 2 megawatts to max out the theoretical draw to 48 megawatts. To check if overdraw would still affect things, I then swapped it to an M suborder for a total draw of 49 megawatts. This seemed to slow down the recipe by a bit, but once again, I realized that doing this on a short recipe in dev branch would not make it clear. So I let the recipe run and turned to an ammunition factory again. Toggled its recipe off so the total power draw would drop below 48 megawatts. Then toggle it back on to overdraw the system by 1 megawatt. This time, there was a clear increase in production time, jumping from 25 minutes to 25 minutes and 30 seconds, indicating that overdrawing the power supply to the network will slow down production, not overdrawing the power shown in the power panel. Now, this could be the end of the investigation, but I decided to push it a bit further still. I added a 5th petrol plant to increase the power supplied to the network to double what it theoretically can handle, 60 megawatts. Built out my army of facilities to 16 ammunition factories for a 16 times 4 is 64 megawatt draw, plus a single materials factory to add another 2 megawatts to overdraw the entire system by 10% or 6 megawatts. I fired up 15 of the 16 ammunition factories for a full 60 megawatts of power drawn. At this point, all thermal shielding recipes were still taking 25 minutes of production time. I then turned on the CMAT production and noticed, or imagined, a little bump in production time. Then I went to the final ammunition facility and turned on the recipe to increase the total draw to 66 megawatts. An overdraw of 6 megawatts, or 10% of the supplied power. I checked the production time of the thermal shielding and voila, a significant increase in production time. But, and this is an important but, the slowdown of the recipe is not caused by overdrawing the 30 megawatt limit as shown in the power panel, but by overdrawing the total power supplied to the network. Now, with what sanity still remained, I decided to call it a day here. Which brings us to the non-related question from the beginning. Do I consider this an exploit or a non-intended result of game mechanics? Considering I made a video about it, you would be excused for saying that I think it is neither. However, I do believe this is unintended behavior, and leave you with this. Enjoy the higher than advertised power limits in your power networks for as long as it lasts. And I will be somewhat sorry for being part of the reason if it gets patched out. A big thank you to Average Raider 3322 for raising this issue and dragging me into a new rabbit hole.